All right, guys, so today what I want to do is go through some information that you've already read this week, as well as the pages that you were asked to read today about different ways that scientists use evidence to support the theory of evolution. So be sure that you've read pages 28 to 37 in your book before you get started. And here we have the vocabulary for the lesson. We'll talk about this in a few slides, fossil and fossil record. And if you take a look at this picture, this is pretty cool. So when they were digging the new locks for the Panama Canal, they actually took advantage to bring in a lot of scientists, archaeologists, paleontologists to help study the fossils that they found. And they were able to make some really cool discoveries because Panama is such an interesting source of fossils as it links the two continents, North and South America, together. So just a little fun fact. All right, as a review from Wednesday, fossils can form in a variety of different ways. They can form over time in amber, like you see in this picture here. That is when tree sap hardens around a living thing and their whole body or whatever part is trapped in the amber is preserved. Similarly, they can also be trapped in ice. So you may remember that organisms like the woolly mammoth, their bodies have been found preserved in ice, and scientists could even see what their skin looks like and what their hair looks like. And finally, they can form in sedimentary rock. So take a look at this picture. This is an example of sedimentary rock. And that is a rock that is formed by layers and layers over time. So you can see in the picture, there's almost different stripes of different colors. And scientists can tell how old a fossil is in the sedimentary rock layer by seeing how deep it is. So a fossil that's found way down here, buried beneath many more layers, is older than something that's buried closer to the surface. All right, so going over some of our vocabulary. To recall, fossils are the remains or imprints of once living things. So sometimes when we see a fossil, it could just be a fossil of their footprint, showing us maybe the size of or shape of their feet, how many limbs that they had, but they can also preserve the shape of a living thing. And usually harder parts of the body are more easily preserved. So bones or shells, those types of things are more commonly seen in a fossil. And when we're talking about all the fossils that have ever been discovered in the world, we put them in order like a timeline, and that's what we call the fossil record. So the fossil record shows how living things have changed over a period of time. And sometimes in that fossil record, there are gaps of time, thousands or millions of years when we don't really know what organism came in between one and the other. So in your book, there's an organism that kind of looks like this. It shows a fish-like creature that may have grown some sort of limbs and then been able to walk on land. So organisms like that, when we find a fossil like that, are called transitional fossils. So they help to show us how one species, like a fish, evolved into another, maybe some sort of lizard or reptile that can walk on land. All right, so today you guys started to look at different pieces of evidence that scientists use to show that evolution is actually taking place. And one thing that they look at are common structures. So even though some of these structures may not be used anymore or might not be used in the same way, the fact that they exist in many different species shows that we are related by some common ancestor a very long time ago. So in this picture, you can see an example of the forearm bones in 4 different living things, 4 different animals. We have the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat. So even though these bones are maybe slightly different shapes and they might be used in different ways, we can see that all of these bones here are present in each animal. So that shows that at some point we all evolved from a similar ancestor. And where I say the bones might not be used anymore, an example of that could be a hip bone that you can still find in a whale. Obviously, they don't have legs, so they don't really need a hip bone like we have. Humans also have tailbones still. If you've ever fallen on your bottom or your back, you may have felt that. It hurts when you fall on. But that tailbone that we have, we don't need it, but it shows a connection to maybe some of our common ancestors, like primates. So that's always interesting to think about. And those structures that we don't use anymore, those are called vestigial structures. So if you ever see that word, that's what that means. So another way that we can figure out if two species are related to one another is by comparing their DNA. So by comparing DNA and looking at all of the molecules that make up our DNA, we can see if there are more similarities or more differences between us and other species. So here we have some examples. The genetic similarity between a human and a cat is 90%, which I think is super cool. So we are more similar than different than cats. And here's another example. The genetic similarity between a human and a cow is 80%. So again, you are a lot closer related to cats and cows than you may have believed before. So this looks very confusing, but this is how scientists can use DNA to compare if species are related or not. So this is a small piece of DNA. So we have many more, these are called base pairs or proteins in our DNA. Many more than this, so this is just a tiny snapshot that we've taken. So we have a strip of DNA from a human, a mouse, a rat, a cow, and a chimp. So the way that we can compare if we are related or not is by counting the differences in our DNA. So I've gone ahead and done that. I've compared what our human DNA looks like versus the mouse, and I counted 6 differences, like this one here, in the DNA between a human and a mouse. And I did that again with the rat, the cow, and the chimp. So in this snapshot of DNA between us and the mouse, we have 6 differences. Between humans and the rat, there are 4. Between humans and cows, there are 5. And between humans and chimps, there are 0. So humans and chimps are, of these examples, the most closely related because in this snapshot of our DNA, we don't have any differences. But comparing the human and the mouse, since we have 6 differences, that means that we are the most different or the least related in this example. And you might be asking, why is it that chimps have 0 differences, but we look so different from chimps? And that's because, again, this is just a tiny piece of the DNA that we're comparing. There are many, many more letters that go on and on and on and on. It could fill books, encyclopedias, if we printed it all out. So again, this is just a small snapshot, but if you looked at the whole code between humans and chimps, there would be some differences, but not a ton. All right, here is another example, developmental similarities. So another way that we can compare if living things are related or not is by looking at their embryos. So this is called embryology. So here in the first row, we have an early image of what each of these organisms look like when they are in their mother's womb. When they have just been fertilized, the cells are starting to divide and grow and take shape into a living thing. So taking a look at these organisms, especially on the right, take a look at this: chicken, pig, and human. And even the lizard, honestly. All of those embryos look very, very similar. If I covered up these names, it would probably be hard to tell which one is a human versus which one is a pig. As the embryos start to grow and divide, they start to take shape into the organisms that they will actually become. But again, the way that they start and what these embryos look like helps us to see which ones are more closely related because of the way that we start to develop. All right. So that is it for today. I hope that you guys I hope that this helps to explain some more of the concepts that you read about this week. If you have any questions, feel free to chat me or post in the group. But other than that, that is all I have to say. Thank you guys.